Okay, the graph has reached an asymptote, to break out some old math terminology. So I think we can get started. This is Joe Envik here. If you go to the next slide, Kyle. And I'm really excited to say that in this session, we're going to be diving into energy efficiency as a service, which is an approach to doing energy retrofits that has garnered a lot of increased attention over the last couple of years. It's one of the things we most commonly get asked about in the Better Buildings community. So I'm really excited to have a dedicated session about nothing but efficiency as a service today. So if you're new to this concept, not to worry, we're going to do some introductory background at the beginning to get you up to speed. But if you're a veteran, you're also in luck, because we're going to do a kind of a deep dive into how efficiency as a service is being applied in practice with two of the leading providers of this solution on the call with us today. So to do that, we're going to do a little bit of a different approach here. We're going to have, after the initial presentations, a sort of fireside chat with the two providers, Aaron and Julia, to go through kind of how their approaches work in more detail and really get into the nitty gritties of the efficiency as a service model and how it's being deployed. So I'm excited for that. But just to set the stage quickly, as we all know, the world is sort of rapidly shifting to an as a service approach to service delivery in lots of areas of the economy. You've got music as a service with Spotify and Pandora. You've got transportation as a service with Lyft and Uber. You've got software as a service that's becoming increasingly ubiquitous. And efficiency as a service is in a lot of ways a response to the same desire to dramatically simplify the user experience or the customer experience when it comes to doing energy retrofits. And so we're going to dig into that, how that all works. And I think most importantly for you, give you some information that you as the audience could use to decide if efficiency as a service is a solution you may or may not want to explore for your organization. So before we dive in, a couple of logistical things. So we are going to be recording this session, and it'll be posted to the Better Building Solutions Center for your reference. We'll let you know via email when the recording becomes available. And you're going to be in listen-only mode as an attendee, so you'll be muted. If you have any audio issues or any issues of any kind, feel free to use the Zoom chat function, and our tech support people will get you taken care of. So if you go to the next slide, again, I'm Joe Envik. I'm going to be moderating today. I'm the head of clean energy finance at Redactive Advisors, which is a consulting firm here in the DC area. And along with Kyle Saltzman, who's running the slides today, I co-lead the financing sector for the Better Buildings Challenge on behalf of the Department of Energy. So great to be with you all today. And then if you go to the next slide, our agenda is pretty simple. I'm going to do a brief overview of efficiency as a service to give everyone some background. We're going to hear short presentations from each of our providers. Then we're going to do the sort of fireside chat guided interview with both of them. And then we'll have plenty of time for audience Q&A at the end as well. If you go to the next slide, and this should not be unfamiliar to you if you've been on other summit sessions, but we're going to be using Slido for Q&A, polling, and session feedback. So you can go to slido.com right now, and we're about to do a poll, so I'd suggest you do this now on your mobile device, or you can open a new window on your internet browser and use the event code #DOE. Once you enter that code, you can then select the session for today from the drop-down menu at the top right. The session, again, is called Anatomy of EaaS. And if you want to ask the panelists any questions during the presentation, you can submit them at any time, and we'll get to as many of them as we can at the end. And so go ahead and open up Slido now. We're going to be launching a poll, which you can see here, asking which sector you come from. So if you'd please respond to that quickly, we'll get a sense for where everybody's coming to us from. Okay. Good mix of various government folks, contractors and service providers, some commercial real estate. Pretty good showing from nonprofits. That's interesting. Higher education. So yeah, a good smattering of different sectors represented today. That's great. So I think everything we'll be covering is going to be applicable to pretty much all the sectors we see listed here. Although we have seen different kind of adoption rates among different sectors, which we'll talk about when we get there. So I think we can go back to the slide deck. I'm really excited for our two speakers today. They're kind of longtime colleagues of myself and Kyle, and have frankly contributed massively to the growth and efficiency as a service that we are seeing in the market right now, and really helped shape a lot of that growth. So it's great to have them both here. We've got Julia Berg from Redaptive and Aaron Block from Allumia, and I'm going to introduce them more fully before their segments of the presentation. But I should also note that Redaptive and Allumia are both financial allies in the Better Buildings Challenge, which means that they've committed to helping partners get energy projects done by deploying innovative financing solutions. So they are available to chat if you'd like to talk to them, and their contact information is going to be available at the end of the presentation. So a little bit of background, if we go to the next slide. background to kind of set the stage here. I always like to remind us of where we're at within the broader universe of financing options. And if you attended the 5 key trends in energy finance session yesterday, this will look familiar to you. This is how we at the Department of Energy kind of think about the landscape of financing options for energy efficiency and renewable energy. You have sort of traditional financing on the left-hand side, things like leases and loans. And then you have specialized financing, which are financial products designed specifically for energy efficiency and renewable energy. So it's things like on-bill financing, property assessed clean energy, and this broad category of energy services, which includes a variety of different instruments, one of which is efficiency as a service, which we're going to be talking about today. So that's kind of where we sit within the broader universe. You go to the next slide, and if you'd like to learn more about efficiency as a service or any of those other financing options after this webinar today, I highly suggest you check out the Better Buildings Financing Navigator, which is a free, publicly available online tool that we created to help you find financing solutions that'll work for your organization. So this is a really good way to explore the different options. We have case studies and fact sheets and resources. And I think most importantly, it's a way to connect directly with the financial allies, which are a group of about 50 financing companies that have signed on as partners in Better Buildings, who sort of stand ready to help you look at projects and potentially finance those projects as well. So highly suggest you check it out. You can go to the link below once the slides are shared, or you can just Google Better Buildings Financing Navigator, and it'll take you right to it. On to the next slide. I want to take a moment to define what efficiency as a service means more broadly before Aaron and Julia kind of talk about what it means in the context of their individual offerings. But efficiency as a service is a way of doing energy retrofits that is off balance sheet and a third-party ownership model. Now, this I will caveat this by saying this does not constitute accounting guidance. We're simply reporting on what most agree is true about these things. But generally speaking, it's a third-party ownership model for energy retrofits, which means that a efficiency as a service provider actually owns and operates the energy equipment on your behalf, typically with no money down. So that provider is usually financing the equipment themselves up front, which means you as the customer typically don't have to make any payments up front. In terms of the actual contract itself, it's a services contract that has typically a pay for performance element, which means you're paying for the service of energy savings or the service of keeping the lights on or whatever that service might be. It's a services contract structure, which is why most folks consider this to be an off balance sheet solution. So it's a little bit different than traditional financing in that regard. And also, because the provider owns and operates the equipment, they typically are handling installation and maintenance, either themselves or through a contracted contractor or engineering firm. So to give you a sense for kind of what that looks like in practice, this is one version of an efficiency as a service arrangement, an energy services agreement. So you have an ESA provider. That provider has a direct contractual relationship with the customer through an ESA in this case, but they also have a contract with a contractor or an energy services company that's actually doing the installation and maintenance. So unlike a lot of traditional financing, it's the ESA provider or the efficiency as a service provider that's bearing a lot of the performance risk should the equipment not perform as expected. And we have a great fact sheet on this that's also on the Better Buildings Financing Navigator. If you want to dive in more, we've got lots of good case studies linked from that fact sheet as well. So if you go to the next slide, you'll hear a lot of different terms thrown around to describe efficiency as a service. There's not a whole lot of standardization in how people talk about this. So some of the words you might hear used to describe a similar model are things like ESAs, CISAs or CESAs, MESAs. You might hear technology subscription agreement. You might just hear it called a services contract. You could hear lumens as a service. You could hear lighting as a service, since lighting is a very popular technology type for this model. Those aren't all identical, of course. There's lots of variations between providers and between models, but most of the folks who use that terminology are talking about basically the same concept. Everything that I just described in the prior slide would apply to each of those models. So if you go to the next slide, one question that may be occurring to many of you, because we get this question a lot, is sort of how is this different than a traditional energy savings performance contract? And the answer is there are some similarities, but there are a lot of differences. And in fact, we get this question so much that we decided to just develop a fact sheet about it to try to demystify some of this. So there is a fact sheet now available on the Better Building Solutions Center called the EaaS versus ESPC fact sheet, which you can also just Google. That's easier. But just to summarize some of the differences. So energy performance contract, or ESPCs, typically the customer owns the actual equipment that's being installed. Usually they're financing it through a loan or a lease. And so it's typically considered to be on balance sheet customer owned. Whereas with efficiency as a service, as we discussed, it's the service provider that owns the equipment. And it's typically considered off balance sheet for that reason. In terms of the project size and contract length, energy performance contracting, ESPCs have historically been more tailored to larger scale projects with longer term contracts, so 10 to 20 years, $1 million plus contracts. Efficiency as a service can provide those types of services as well, and does in a lot of cases, but it can also do smaller or more like single measure projects, like a $50,000 LED upgrade, for example, which is less common to see ESPCs doing. You still, you occasionally will see efficiency as a service deals as small as 25,000 or less, although it's still pretty uncommon to go that low. So a little bit more flexibility and on contract term and size. In terms of the most common sectors where you see these options used, they're actually almost exactly polar opposites of each other. So energy performance contracting has historically been more common in federal government and MUSH, so municipalities, universities, schools, and hospitals, because they offer kind of large scale opportunities over long periods of time. But it is growing increasingly in the commercial space, as you might have heard on the 5 trends presentation yesterday. Efficiency as a service is almost exactly the opposite. So it's most common in private sector, things like commercial, a little bit of higher education and healthcare, but it is increasingly growing in the MUSH market and government markets as well. So great to see folks from a nice smattering of all of those sectors on the call today. And in terms of standardization, energy performance contracts have been around for a long time, and there's a lot of guidance that's been released at the federal level and elsewhere to help kind of standardize the way that these contracts are set up. Efficiency as a service is not exactly the new kid on the block. I mean, it's been around for like more than a decade at this point, but it certainly has less standardization and a much broader diversity of providers offering all kinds of different takes, as evidenced by the 8 different names for it that we saw on that slide a couple of slides ago. So if we go to the next slide here, I want to talk a little bit about the market trends in efficiency as a service. Generally, the consensus is that it is growing and quite rapidly and has pretty significant potential for future growth as well. So Navigant is one of the research shops that studies this pretty closely and releases a market study every now and again. This is from a study they released in 2017, looking at the potential for global energy as a service market. So it's not just efficiency. This includes things like power purchase agreements, for example, but efficiency as a service is a good chunk of this most likely. And they're anticipating it could be as much as a $200 billion a year global market by 2026. So there has been a lot of historical growth, a lot of potential future growth. Most folks seem to agree. That is sort of corroborated anecdotally by what the Better Buildings financial allies have seen. So of the allies in our network, again, there's about 50 folks, maybe more than half of which do some sort of efficiency as a service arrangements. They have collectively reported about 2.5x increase in the amount of deals that they've done since they joined the program. So there's significant growth happening. And that's 2.5 increase in the annual deals, I should say. So likely to see continued growth in this area, as we are in other areas of as a service. If you go to the next slide, this is my last slide before we get to the presentations. The growth of efficiency as a service has led to what could only really be called a Cambrian explosion of contract options when it comes to how you actually set these contracts up. In fact, there's many different ways to set up efficiency as a service contracts. Every provider does it a little bit differently. And to try to kind of demystify some of that, over the last year, in consultation with Lawrence Berkeley National Labs and several of our financial allies, the Department of Energy has done some interviews with providers and tried to kind of standardize what are the different options for structuring an efficiency as a service contract. You can think of this like a menu of options where you're picking one item from each course, essentially, along this diagram. So I don't want to belabor this too much, but generally speaking, you can see how much diversity there is here. There's diversity in how the loan or the financing is secured on the equipment. It can be a lien on equipment or a lien on the property. There's different definitions of services. So it can be a shared savings model where the customer and the provider split the savings. It can be a dollars per megawatt where the customer is paying a certain number of cents per kilowatt hour saved, essentially. It can be defined as the delivery of a certain energy service that's not savings. It could be like keeping the lights on for a certain number of operating hours a year, or providing a certain number of lumens to a space, that kind of thing. And there's all kinds of flexibility in how the savings are measured and verified, if at all, and what the end of term options are. So I am happy to say that this sort of menu of options, along with kind of an accompanying fact sheet, is going to be released later this year, and will be available to everybody on the Solutions Center if you want to use this as a way to become sort of a smarter, more informed consumer of this type of financing. So that's all I had for introductory remarks. Feel free to let me know if you have questions in Slido, and we can definitely answer some general questions as well as questions specifically for Aaron and Julia. If we go to the next slide, I want to introduce Julia. So Julia is a partnerships executive at Redactive. They're based in San Francisco, and they were a goal achiever in Better Buildings, the Better Buildings Challenge. So congratulations for that. And they offer their services nationwide. So she's prepped a short presentation that's kind of an overview of Redaptive and their specific approach to efficiency as a service. So Julia, I'll hand it to you.
Great. Thanks, Joe. And I just want to thank the Better Buildings team. I've been at Redaptive for about 3 years, but been in the industry, the clean tech sector, for about 12. And you guys have just done a phenomenal job growing the platform and engaging a lot of companies in it and service providers. So both Joe and Kyle, we really appreciate your efforts. Everyone, it's great to meet you. I'm Julia Berg, and I'm Partnerships Executive at Redaptive. And yes, we are an efficiency as a service provider. And our platform is designed to address the outsized waste and extra spend that exists and is rampant throughout distributed real estate portfolios. So we do so by providing a turnkey platform, mostly to the C&I commercial industrial sector, for deploying demand reduction and behind the meter solutions at scale across customer sites to reach specified enterprise level outcomes, whether they be sustainability or OpEx reduction, and some other outcomes that customers are really looking to achieve through our platform. So if you go to the next slide, I'm going to provide a high-level overview of who Redaptive is and what we are as a company, efficiency as a service, and why customers are buying it, the value of achieving scale and why we think that's a differentiator in the marketplace, go through the transparency and performance monitoring solution that we offer, and then discuss a case study which explains why adoption at scale is really important for achieving specific sustainability and portfolio optimization metrics. Next slide. So you probably recognize some of these companies. We focus on the Fortune 500 and mostly the C&I sector. So retail, industrial, manufacturing. We do some work in healthcare and some in higher ed, but we're focusing on those enterprise level customers where we can drive results across the portfolio. Next slide. And our journey started in 2013 when we actually were providing efficiency as a service to AT&T. And we really designed our program for a lighting rollout with the energy managers at AT&T and to support our further market penetration by bringing more customers on board. We've been raising capital throughout our 8 years journey and have now deployed over $400 million towards efficiency programs throughout our customer portfolio. We've also added a lot of different solutions onto our platform. So we don't just do lighting anymore. We do HVAC. We're developing solutions for behind the meter technologies as well. So we're really excited about the growth that we've seen. Next slide. So you ask, why does a customer need a third-party provider to address some of the challenges with deploying efficiency across their portfolio? We see this as about a 5-pronged challenge for customers that are looking to really get more optimization and efficiency throughout their sites. First, there's a lack of technical expertise throughout the companies. So often, companies might not have a specific energy management or facilities management team that would know how to design and develop a program that can effectively and efficiently reach the sites across their portfolio. Oftentimes, enterprise C&I customers are buying and selling sites, breaking and entering leases all the time. And so there's a lot of development and design work that goes into these types of programs. There's also historically been a lack of awareness at the C-suite level. So we've seen a lot of momentum lately in science-based targets and net zero energy goals. But until the past 12 months or so, we haven't seen the same type of momentum for net zero, carbon reduction, and electrification. And so there have been a bit of a lack of awareness for not only why customers need to move towards decarbonization, but also what the value and economic value proposition is behind efficiency. Obviously, a lack of funding is a key challenge when executing these projects. And then there's also payback or ROI hurdle rates that customers have to achieve. And Redaptive's platform works to cross-collateralize or bundle both site level economics with technologies to manage towards a specific payback. And so that's a pretty unique aspect of our platform. And then there's also often a lot of uncertainty in performance and savings. And we've developed a circuit level meter that goes directly into the panel to measure the savings that is being accrued on an asset level. Next slide. So how do we do it? Well, we have, again, a turnkey approach, just as Aaron will speak to about how Illumia's approach is. We have a similar approach to going in and delivering this as a service platform. But we basically provide the upfront capital, the program design and delivery resources, and like I mentioned, the M&B, the performance monitoring and measurement behind each of the technologies that we deploy. And so that turnkey platform really helps customers achieve scale. We believe that unless you have that full solution set to reach across customer facilities, engage key stakeholders, and design a value proposition for these programs, scale is a lot harder to achieve. Next slide. So this next slide coming up here, it explains why eliminating the capital and resource constraints that customers see to rapidly capture the value of inefficiencies is often a challenge when deploying at scale. So this graphic is an illustrative example of a customer's portfolio and the variable energy use across it. Now, in their CapEx program, they're targeting 28 sites. Now, what Redaptive can do with that existing CapEx program is take a few example sites and kind of create an extrapolated out approach for, let's say, 314 sites across their portfolio. We figure out how much that would cost to deploy at scale. And then we use benchmarking data and our internal modeling capabilities to identify how much savings might be captured through a scaled program at an accelerated rate. Oftentimes, we can get a whole portfolio of sites done between 12 and 18 months. And that's just a rapidly faster accelerated rate than customers are used to doing on their own. And then we're able to harvest more savings faster and at scale. And customers see a lot of value in that. Next slide. And so the transparency and performance monitoring component of our platform is also a key differentiator. When we talk to customers, there's often sort of a black box with efficiency. You know, it's a very challenging M&B proposition, but Redaptive has worked to commercialize the process, not only by developing this kind of circuit level meter that's low cost and fits directly into the electrical panel and can isolate the performance of each asset, but also developing the capability to integrate with other building systems through an API structure. We also add that contract flexibility to our solution so that customers feel comfortable around the terms that we enter into program with and the performance outs, if you will, within the contract, because it is an as a service, and we want to make sure that customers are extremely comfortable with how the assets are performing within their buildings. Next slide. So this is a case study of a Fortune 25 banking client of ours. We deployed an HVAC optimization program across their Northeast portfolio of retail sites. As you see here, we hit 234 retail banking sites in the portfolio and addressed nearly 600 HVAC assets with a replace, retrofit, and control program. And we were able to do this all under the umbrella of our efficiency as a service contract. One of the key value propositions is that they're able to eradicate R22 the refrigerant that was banned at the beginning of last year from their portfolio. And that helped them get comfortable with the platform and the value that we're bringing, because it netted out a lot of the potential maintenance risk that they were seeing because of the refrigerant being banned from the portfolio. It's also a huge contribution to their carbon emissions. So we were able to calculate how much savings reacting from eradicating the refrigerant. And then we also embed this flexibility into our contract. They're a bank, right? So why would they use someone else's capital to invest in their own sites? That seems silly. But what they really like about our platform is that when they do want to inject capital into the contract, into the program, they're able to buy down or buy out sites, and they don't incur an interest expense deduction. So it's really a program that can apply to customers that even think that they have the capital. They may have some budget set aside, but it's more prudent to go third-party provider that can achieve the results that they're looking for, and that can do it in a programmatic scaled approach. And I believe that's all I got for today. So it was wonderful to be able to present to all of you, and we're looking forward to Aaron's presentation, how Allumia addresses a different target market. And I'll hand it over to Joe.
Awesome. Thanks, Julia. I see like some truly outstanding questions coming in. Actually, these are really astute questions. So we're going to leave as much time as we can to get to those. We're going to hear a lot more from Julia here once we get to the discussion portion. To introduce Aaron, so he's a founding member and CEO of Allumia. They actually have a lot of things in common with Redaptive. They're based on the West Coast. They joined the Financial Allies program in 2018, and they're also a goal achiever in the program. So congratulations to Allumia. I'll let Aaron take it from here and introduce Olivia further.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. I really appreciate it. And yeah, just absolute joy to hear Julia's download on Redaptive, just because I think that they're doing so much right and they're doing so much cool work. And I see a lot of the things that we're excited about going on there as well. My slides don't talk a whole lot about Allumia and what it is that we're doing, so much as the things that I feel strongly about in the world of efficiency as a service. So quickly, high level about Allumia. Allumia is an efficiency as a service provider. We've been around since 2015. We've got a nationwide presence, and we think about things and we operate in a very similar structure to Redaptive. Our focus is more on what I would call the mid-scale C&I customer base. So Joe was talking at the top about the range of projects that efficiency as a service is a fit for. And Allumia's playground in there is sort of deals that are about $35,000 in size up to about $10 million in size. Occasionally we'll go up above that for somebody who's sort of particularly interested in our brand of efficiency as a service. But I actually think that we dovetail pretty well with providing a similar style service to a slightly different customer base to Redaptive. So whereas Redaptive is really focused on, that Fortune 500 distributed campus deployment where they're putting, $50, $100 million to work at once, we're really focused on making it possible to bring that same solution down to anywhere from your local grocery store to mid-size REITs, sometimes playing in that much market, but again, sort of focused on a slightly smaller customer. And yeah, I'll just talk a little bit about what it is that we think it really means to be efficiency as a service. As Joe was showing, there's a ton of different names for similar things, and there's sort of that menu of options. And one of the reasons, we can get there. What is efficiency as a service to Illumia? And what is efficiency as a service to everybody, really? One of the things I think that the term efficiency as a service has gained as much traction as it has recently without really coalescing around one concept is that accounting treatment that Joe is alluding to, that sort of off-balance sheet treatment. That is very appealing, at least to a lot of people vending this kind of thing. It's not always super important to the people buying it. And if you call it as a service, it is more easy to make the case that you are an off-balance sheet treatment. But that is very often where the similarities stop. So things that are calling themselves as a service range from sort of rental agreements, subscription agreements, managed services agreements. What Illumia does, what Redaptive does, to me falls a little bit more into what I consider to be a true service agreement. And so if you can advance the slide, we're here talking about finance. This is part of the Better Buildings finance community and conversation, but efficiency as a service to me is a lot more than just finance. Efficiency as a service is about delivering simplicity, delivering energy efficiency easily to the end user. Finance is one piece of that. It is a symptom of the overall problem, which is that energy efficiency projects aren't getting done. It is the cough on COVID. It is not the underlying issue. And the underlying issue to me is complexity. As Joe was alluding to again at the top, the arc of economic history is towards specialization, it's towards expertise. The reason that we can have this Zoom conversation as a group of 200 some people is because we aren't all out individually farming and threshing our own wheat, and we aren't cobbling our own shoes. We can focus on doing the things that we do really well, and we can build on what other people do really well. And sort of the older model of building energy efficiency is that somebody, a utility, a contractor, somebody will come to you and say, look, you're in this building, Pacific Gas and Electric, Portland Gas and Electric, National Grid, somebody will give you 30 grand to try to become an energy efficiency expert for your own building. They'll provide you a rebate if you're willing to take the time to try and figure out the HVAC upgrade, the LED lighting upgrade, the refrigeration upgrade. So why don't you take time off from your job basically and try to figure that out? And that's just a ludicrous way to do business, right? The right way for that to be is for the people who are energy experts to come in and say, look, we're the energy experts. We'll design this for you. We'll manage it. We'll install it. And we'll put our money where our mouth is, right? We will get paid based on the value that we're providing you so that you can focus on doing whatever it is that you do best. Maybe that's selling cabbages. Maybe that's flipping hamburgers. Maybe that's, building and leasing space to GSA entities. Whatever it is, it's probably not figuring out the best high efficiency HVAC unit to put on your bank, as Redaptive was able to do for that Fortune 25 customer. So, really what efficiency as a service is about enabling customers to focus on doing what it is that they do better than everyone else in the world, which is generally speaking, not identifying energy efficiency upgrades. So efficiency as a service is about simplicity. And if you'll advance the slide, it starts with a really simple customer experience. And this is sort of how Allumia brands its customer experience is you as an end user, you relax, we'll do the upgrade, you save. We handle everything from coming in, identifying the energy conservation measures, designing the upgrade, managing the contractor doing the installation, handling a lifetime of O&M on that equipment. You as the customer, you pay nothing up front. You just let us come in and do that upgrade. And then you pay only when your building is saving energy, only when we can prove to you that there is a positive impact to your bottom line. And that to me is another really important piece of sort of what I've called the true service model. And it's what Redaptive does, it's what Allumia does. It is providing transparency into what those savings are. It's not saying, hey, it's just physics, trust us that an LED light is gonna save you energy. It's we're gonna install a revenue grade meter at the device or at the circuit level so we can show you in real time the value that you're actually receiving as a customer. So if we can advance the slide, just to double click a little bit deeper into this, it's a really simple customer experience. Again, this is what efficiency as a service provider should be bringing to you as a customer, right? It's a no cost upgrade. They're gonna fund everything right off the bat, and you're gonna participate in the savings immediately. right? Generally speaking, if you're Redaptive, if you're Allumia, if you're anybody, there's a lead time between when you start construction and when your first bill is issued. And your customer is actually accruing savings that you're never billing them for. Again, because you're the expert as the service provider. It's your job to make sure that they're seeing positive value. So you as a customer, if you're not the efficiency as a service provider, you're really just sitting back and saying, all right, you've claimed to be the expert, show me the money. And you start saving immediately. The performance should be metered. Redaptive does it, we do it. There's a few other folks who are out there, but it's not enough to say, we're the energy expert, you trust us about the savings. Believe me, I've built a very advanced thermodynamic model, or a huge Excel set of spreadsheets, or it's just physics, trust the math. None of those are an acceptable answer for a true service agreement, I think. The right answer is, we'll measure exactly what we're doing for you. We'll show it to you. You don't have to trust us. Look at the numbers. And then the last piece that is, I think, very important to efficiency as a service, and I think most providers factor this in, is the efficiency as a service provider is responsible for the ongoing maintenance of that equipment for the duration of the contract, right? It's not just, we're going to provide you a loan so you can go out and pay for equipment that you're then responsible for. No, you're providing a service, you're providing value to that customer. And so holding on to that O&M cost, making it simple for the customer to ensure that they're just receiving savings, they're just receiving value. They shouldn't have to schedule somebody to come out and fix a broken HVAC motor. The service provider is that one neck to choke, which I know Julia thinks is not the most politically correct way to put it, but the customer should just have one person that they reach out to call to solve their problems. Just like any other service provider. The idea is a simple customer experience that isn't fractured. It's not divided across a bunch of providers. So if we can advance the slide. To dive a little bit deeper into the metering, I sort of got on this hobby horse on the last slide, so I won't go too much here. But again, it's about making it very, very easy for that customer to see and understand those savings. Julia was talking about circuit level metering. Allumia similarly believes that the value of that metering is very high, and we've developed a revenue grade meter of our own, really focused on making it very easy, very simple to measure those impacts, either at the circuit level or even at the individual device level. And to do that in a way that provides the customer clarity and confidence in the value that they're receiving. We talk about this, a lot of the work that Illumia does is through utilities, actually. We provide them a white label system so that they can offer efficiency as a service. And when we're talking to those utilities, we frame this as, your customers buy kilowatt hours from you. And the way that they measure the kilowatt hours that they're buying from you is through this meter that you've installed at the edge of the building envelope. And this is just the next natural evolution of that, right? You've installed a meter, you can measure exactly what the equipment is doing, what the value it's providing is. It makes it easy for the customer to say, look, I don't have to be an expert in this space. I can focus on doing my job. So I won't beat that horse anymore, but I think that metering is a very important piece of true efficiency as a service. And if we'll advance to the next slide, it gives way to a very simple payment structure. And this is how Redaptive does it. This is how Allumia does it. It's a payment based on the savings that are generated. The dollars saved viewed at the meter is what determines what the customer pays every month. So rather than saying, look, we're going to do this upgrade for you, you're going to pay us a fixed amount every month. If you don't see the savings, come back to us and we'll give you a refund. That's sort of the traditional ESPC way of doing it, the ESCO way of doing it. Efficiency as a service and efficiency as a service as Redaptive and Illumia provide it, flips that on its head. It puts the burden of proof on the provider. And it says, look, we'll prove to you what your savings are, and then you're going to pay me 50 cents, 60 cents of every dollar that I can prove that I saved you. But if I can't prove that I saved you anything, your bill is zero, right? I'm the energy expert. I'm going to put the burden of proof on myself. You will pay me after you've saved. And again, it's just designed towards making it very, very simple for the end customer. So advance the slide again. You know, who does this
Just
work
a
for?
1 minute warning. Aaron,
1
if
minute
you'd
warning.
wrap up.
I thought I was going to be done in 5 minutes. I apologize. I got really
All good.
excited about this and started going hard.
No worries.
Efficiency as a service works sort of for all sizes of customers. So Allumia's got customers ranging from the federal government, you know, we've got some US Navy facilities, all the way down to your local YMCA, right? Again, the thing that all of these people have in common is that their business is not energy efficiency. Their business is running neighborhood programs in the case of the YMCA, and, you know, staffing the world's largest military fleet in the case of the US Navy. And their business, their job is not energy efficiency. And so the as a service model enables them to move very easily. Advance the slide again, I'll talk very quickly. Why we're here, why we're all here, is that there's just this massive missed opportunity in energy efficiency. Last year, renewables development, battery storage, wind, and solar combined to about $50 billion of investment. And over that same time period, the commercial and industrial businesses that Julia and I serve wasted $130 billion to inefficient, outdated systems. So the free money that is out there to be claimed is huge. It's insane. And the reason that people aren't claiming it is because, again, it's not their main focus of their business. And that's where efficiency as a service comes in, is taking that off the table. So last slide, we'll just advance real quick. What I would advise you to look for in an efficiency as a service agreement: you want a provider who's going to manage all the details for you. They're going to manage the contractors. They're going to manage the bidding processes. They're going to handle all of the payments to those contractors. They're going to take on the performance risk. This is what I was talking about with the metering. You should have long-term maintenance included in your program. They should be paying for the O&M. And you should only pay them after you've received value. It should be very easy for you to understand the value. I think that metered savings are better than modeled savings, but at the very least, there should be very clear expectations set at the beginning about what you as a customer are going to receive. And then I think you should evaluate the accounting treatments. Again, this is in no way accounting advice. Your CPA is going to have to make the final decision. But efficiency as a service is set up. All of us sort of generally agree. The intention is for it to be an off-balance sheet transaction. And that's valuable because it doesn't encumber your balance sheet. It doesn't impact your credit score. It's just very simple and easy. But at the end of the day, the one thing that I would encourage you to focus on about all else is, with efficiency as a service, you're buying outcomes, not inputs. You're buying savings, not light bulbs, not HVAC motors. You want results. And efficiency as a service lets you get results while focusing on doing what you do best. That's all I got.
Awesome. Thanks, Aaron. That was great. So we're going to do about a 15-minute kind of fireside chat here. I've got some questions prepared to dive deeper into their models and really understand how efficiency as a service works with Redaptive and Allumia in practice. And then we'll have, starting around 3 o'clock Eastern, we'll have about 15 minutes for audience Q&A as well. A lot of good questions still coming in. Keep asking questions in Slido and keep upvoting the ones that you like, and we should be able to get to 5 or 6 of those when we hit that at 3 o'clock. So a couple questions for you guys, just to understand more about how this works, since most of our audience is building owners and operators who are probably interested in this, primarily as prospective customers. How do you go about finding customers for efficiency as a service? Like, who comes to you? Is it the C-suites at the organizations you work with? Is it through contractors? Like, how do you get these relationships in the first place? Whoever would like to take that first, feel free.
I can jump on that. So Redaptive has a channel sales model. And as a partnership executive, I work directly with our partners to train them up on how to present efficiency as a service as an option for scaling their projects. And these partners kind of come in a variety of different forms. Facilities management companies like CBRE, who had our Series B round. We work with sustainability solutions providers. We work with developers who may have been doing 10, 15, 20 sites a year for certain customers, and they really want to blow it out of the water and do a scaled program. Those are the types of channel partners we work with.
Cool. Yeah, and our model is, I would say it's a little bit of a barbell model. We don't do a lot of the sort of partnership work that Julia and Redaptive do. We do a lot of sort of direct to customer work. Either they reach out to us, more often than not, they reach out to us because they're looking for a solution of this type. And that can be anything from, REITs to, fast food franchisees to school districts, or just, commercial office building owners. Or we're out there dialing for dollars, out there talking to customers, particularly in markets where we know that sustainability is a big driver. We're based in Seattle, obviously, which is a pretty sustainably oriented city. And the other way that we engage with customers is through our utility platform. So we do work with a handful of utilities to provide them the ability to sort of white label efficiency as a service and take that out to their customers. That might be a little bit more parallel to sort of, Julia's CBRE relationship, where CBRE has this massive network of, probably the largest in the world network of commercial buildings that they manage, and they can provide this sort of complete solution. Within the customer organization, we tend to work with two distinct entities, or two distinct, types of person within the customer entity, which is generally somebody on the finance arm, CFO, whoever is ultimately responsible for the P&L of the business, and then almost always somebody from the facilities group. Again, the facilities team is responsible for making sure that everybody in that building is able to see what they're doing. They're comfortable, there's cool air, the groceries are refrigerated, and they're spread thin. They're doing a million things at once. And so this is just a way for them to sort of lever their time, a force multiplier, if you will. Gotcha. Where they can say, all right, I've identified that this needs to get done. Here's an easy way to get all of it done. And, there's no cash out of pocket for my CFO. So I'm confident that I can get it done.
Yeah, shameless plug. Redaptive is no stranger for dialing for dollars either. So if there are any interested parties in the audience, feel free to reach out. We do some referral partner networks as well. And just as Aaron has suggested about Allumia, our internal customers are typically facilities directors, energy managers, sustainability leads throughout the organization.
Got it. Okay. Just going to ask you that. So maybe for Julia first on this one, what's the sort of hardest question you typically get from a customer as part of the sales process?
We typically get the question around, do we guarantee savings? And our answer is that we guarantee performance of the asset, and that, as Aaron suggested, we provide maintenance on the assets that we own when we deploy them. But customers are burned from this savings guarantee that you get in performance contracting. And we go the transparency route. We say we will measure the savings that we produce through our systems and bill against those savings.
And Aaron, how about you in terms of hardest, most challenging question?
I would say that's probably up there, which is, are you guaranteeing the savings, and how are you guaranteeing? And what we say is, we aren't going to guarantee the savings, but we guarantee that we will only bill you a portion of whatever those savings are. We guarantee that you'll be revenue positive. And the other, I think the other hardest thing that we're up against, I don't even know if it really counts as the question, just sort of like, this sounds important, but it's not urgent. Trevor got his arm stuck in the conveyor belt, and I've got OSHA coming to the office tomorrow, and that's the most important thing for me. And again, that comes back to the simplicity thing, but it's just sort of getting the attention, getting the buy-in. Our customers do they're spread real thin.
All right, for Trevor. So kind of corollary to that question, what's a question you wish customers would ask more, or that you think they should be asking more aggressively as part of the sales process? Maybe we could start with Aaron on that one and then go with Julia.
Oh man. Usually at the end of any sort of sales conversation, I say that the question that they should have asked is, what question should I have asked? But I think what I would like to have customers ask is tell me about how you prove the savings. Tell me about this metering process, what's going on there. I think very often what they ask is, what's the cost of capital? Is it off balance sheet? And all of those things are important, but like really the differentiator is like, how are you making this easy and risk-free for me? And I think that that's what I would like to see customers focusing on. Obviously, the question that I really want them to ask is, how soon can you start? But other than that question.
And Julia?
The question I wish people ask and really focused on is, how do I present this to my leadership team in a way that hits all the parameters around the economic value proposition that they need to see to really advocate for the program internally? That's the hardest part, is getting the attention of the leadership or the C-suite and explaining to them why it makes sense to deploy faster and why you should focus on your whole portfolio, as opposed to having a site-by-site process that is encumbered by budget cycles, approval processes, Trevor getting stuck in a conveyor belt, all these things. Like, you just want to eliminate all the red tape and have it managed externally by a third party.
So speaking of that, and has got a couple of questions about this too, right? What it says about efficiency of the service on the tin sounds a little bit too good to be true. Like, it's no money down. Allumia / Redaptive bears all of the performance risk. You don't have to own the equipment. We're moving all the complexity off your plate to us. And oh, by the way, you only pay when you save. Do you ever get a reaction of like, that sounds too good to be true? Or like, how, people who are sort of incredulous that could ever actually be profitable and there must be some catch? Like, does that ever come up, and how do you respond to that?
Yeah, we get that a lot. And I have a love-hate relationship with that phrase, because on one hand, it says, okay, the person gets it. They understand the key value propositions, and it's kind of like an aha moment. But then you realize, okay, we got a long way to go, because it's not too good to be true. It's a lot of work to work with Redaptive and Illumia to move the concept up the chain through the approval process. Now, we can get it done in 120 days, but we've got to have an internal champion and a partner. And that's the moment when I know that there's a little bit more education on the sales cycle and the process internally.
Yeah, I think we get that question all the time, or that comment all the time. It sounds too good to be true. And even before Illumia, I was doing sort of solar as a service, as a spin on solar PPAs, back in the heady early days of solar finance, and we were getting the same question then. And it's not too good to be true, right? I'm not running this as a charity. The impact is important to me, but I'm making money off of these deals. I'm not going to hide that from you. It's just that, like, the transaction cost, the reason it's not too good to be true is because what we've done is consolidated all of the transaction costs into one stakeholder, which is Allumia. And the fact is that the reason that money is there, the reason that it's viable, is because we've done that consolidation for you. And if you try to do it across a gazillion stakeholders, the costs just explode, both monetarily and opportunity-wise. So it's there's no like hidden fees, there's no tricks, there's no magic. It's just like sitting down and doing the work is all that's really going on there.
Right. That's so true.
Gotcha. Yeah, and the fact that the economics on energy efficiency are just so good, there's a lot of margin to work with, right? Like, I feel like people are sometimes incredulous that you can get 2-year paybacks on LEDs, but there it is.
Well,
right?
Right.
So I would offer some pushback there, which is that we go talk to a large number of customers, or we're brought in to talk to a large number of customers where they've been told that their project has an 18-month payback or a 6-month payback or a 2-year payback. And we come in and we offer them a 5-year service contract. And they say, hey, I thought this thing had, a tremendous value, a really short payback. And the reality is, like, it would if the assumptions that the person who gave you that bid were true. But, in the world of lighting, a 32-watt T8 doesn't consume 32 watts, it consumes 28. And it's literally impossible for your building to be operating 9,000 hours a year because there aren't 9,000 hours in a year. The numbers just aren't there. And so that's, again, sort of like one of the values of having somebody come in with an efficiency as the service agreement is there's just a lot of sort of unknown unknowns if this isn't your world, right? Knowing how much a light bulb actually consumes based on its nameplate wattage, knowing what you can expect, a grocery store that's listed operating 16 hours a day, how many hours is that thing actually operating? When you've done 100 of them, as we have, it's pretty easy to know that. If you don't, if you've just sort of got one, it's easy to sort of get swept up into somebody else's stated assumptions. And the values aren't aligned there. With a metered efficiency as a service agreement, those values are aligned, right? We can't tell you that we're going to save you on lighting 9,000 hours a year because our meter is never going to show that. And so again, that value alignment, that simplicity is just so important.
Great. So transitioning out of kind of customer relationships and how all that works to the technology. So getting a little bit more into the technical details here. Julia, maybe starting with you. I know Redaptive started with lighting and then has kind of transitioned into other technologies as you've gotten more comfortable with that risk, presumably. Where do you see the future? Well, first of all, what does it take for Redaptive to get comfortable with a particular technology type to be sort of brought into the fold of your model? And what do you see as the future? What are technologies that it can't currently serve, but that you hope it will in the next 5 or 10 years, say?
Yeah, so Redactive started with lighting, and we grew our platform to include HVAC. We've done large-scale commissioning deployment across the central offices of AT&T for that program. It took a internal champion that had developed it themselves and actually written the code to optimize their BMS systems and knew where the kind of bodies were buried in terms of needing for repairs. So because of that experience, we've then brought on our own BMS and commissioning expert, and so that we can scale that out to other partners. So to answer your question about what it takes, often it takes the customer bringing us in to a solution that they've partially or fully baked themselves, and we call it, we act as the enabler. And then we've also developed our RTU offering, rooftop unit offering, that often is sold through this need to eradicate R22 or just get new rooftop units on buildings because it's not a priority, as Aaron's mentioned before. And customer, if they're failing at a rapid rate throughout a portfolio, that really runs up the reactive maintenance expense. So to make the economics work on HVAC, we've brought in maintenance savings as a work stream, and we've developed, a savings stream, and we've developed a process around underwriting and getting comfortable with those savings through work order system data and working with the facilities management team at customers. We've also developed a plug load solution, which can be applied to commercial office space. And then we're developing behind the meter distributed energy resource solutions. We know customers are looking to fully decarbonize, and that includes supply. So we're evaluating several solar and battery storage opportunities right now. Technologies that I think would be interesting to bring onto the platform in the future would be heat pumps. I think that those are going to play a big role in electrification. And I would love to do some, I saw a question about grid interaction. I'd love to do some demand management and take credit for demand reduction. Right now we use a blended rate, but if we could do some sort of time of use arbitrage and take credit for that in the future through controls, I think that would be next level in terms of our product roadmap.
That's great. Yeah, Aaron, same. Any quick comments on technologies for you guys?
Yeah, like Redaptive, we started in lighting. I think probably we started in lighting, both of us, for the same reasons. It's it's a great economic payback, but it's also the easiest one to meter. Since then, we've expanded into HVAC and refrigeration. This year, we will hopefully be deploying in the electrification space, so both fuel switching, heat pumps is the big one, but also vehicle electrification, so EVs and EV charging. other things on the roadmap: building automation, building management systems, and motor control. So, largely that sort of grid interactivity, demand response, demand management is big on the roadmap. But I think, near term for us is lighting, HVAC, refrigeration, and electrification, EVs, EV charging, and fuel switching.
Great. Okay. Well, I could grill you guys all day with my questions because it's a lot of fun to
I got
hear your perspectives.
one thing that I want to throw on there.
Oh, yeah, sure.
It's good to hear Julia's response on this as well, which is, for us, the world that we're limited to, or that we've limited ourselves to, are obviously the technology has to actually exist and work and have the paybacks that we expect it to. But the other one is that we're really focused, I guess, on what I would call active energy measures. So you've got to actually be able to meter the device or the circuit. So we don't have any plans to do insulation or windows, building envelope, stuff that sort of by definition you have to model rather than meter.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know sort of where Redaptive comes down on that.
We have looked at whole building and full building metering as a way to capture that building envelope kind of demand or energy savings reduction. Right now, we still focus on isolating the asset, but I would see that could potentially be on our roadmap in the future. Right now, though, we have very much a asset specific model.
Yeah, it's a great point, Erin. So that was awesome discussion. I'm gonna transition over to audience Q&A now. So we have another about 15 minutes here. So again, a lot of good questions on Slido. Keep entering and upvoting questions on there. Again, hashtag DOE is the code for the event. And it's Anatomy of Efficiency as a Service as the session title. So actually, you guys talked both a little bit about decarbonization, and I see a good question here about from Eric says, curious if efficiency as a service can be used to get at some of the much more difficult, complex, and costly initiatives, things like full building decarbonization or electrification of a college campus. Yeah, how does that work? I mean, is there a way you can sort of bundle the poorer payback projects with the better payback projects? And are you guys yet at a point where your model could be used to sort of fully decarbonize a building?
Yeah, so we have a great case study on this. If I can explain, it's with the Institute of Advanced Studies, and they were looking for a net zero carbon microgrid solution. So they ripped out their old boilers, and we put in a geothermal system that would contribute to a net zero carbon campus. And then eventually, we also retrofitted their lights, and we eventually will add solar and storage to the facility. And the intent was to become net zero carbon. And we did that through an as a service model because of the savings that were accrued. And it was a bit of a longer term, obviously, big mechanical systems and a lot of microgrid type work going in. But we can offer that through a team that we now call Campus, and it will focus on those kind of large site projects. And often we couple that with PACE financing, which is kind of a side offering that we've developed in connection with our efficiency as a service platform.
Yeah, I would say, I think certainly we want to contribute as much as we can to total decarbonization, and we do that and are looking to do that through active systems, generation, demand side management. I see the question here sort of touches sort of exactly on some of those passive measures that, have the 20-year payback that triple glazed windows do. It's not a place where we play, and as even from Julia's answer, it tends to involve a slightly different set of transaction structures. Seems like it fits within the Redaptive envelope, but it's not necessarily as a service. In that case, it's PACE. I think another good sort of up and coming solution that might be worth looking at there is the MEETS work. It relies a little bit more on modeling, forecasting, traditional finance plays, a little less sort of the active metering that we view, at least, as sort of the efficiency as a service. And yeah, I mean, folks like NG who bought Ohio State's complete physical plant and just said, we'll sell you physical plant as a service over the next 50 years. Here's $1 billion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a super interesting transaction to look at if anybody's interested. Anji and Ohio State, right?
Yeah.
Aaron? Yeah. Lost my train of thought there. It'll come back. Anyway, a couple other good questions here. So one is how savings are determined. So y'all say you only pay when you save. Can you talk more about how you actually get a little bit nerdy with us for a second here in terms of how you actually measure that and how you set your baseline in particular?
Yeah. Can I go first on this one, Julia?
Yeah, go for it.
So we try to eliminate baselining as much as possible. So that's what the meter, one of the things that the meter is there for, because we know that over the course of a 5-year, a 7-year, a 15-year customer relationship, their behaviors are going to change. Their usage of the facility is going to change. So we come in and we basically, the baselining that we do is what's the nameplate capacity of the device that we're upgrading. And it's really easy to think about this from lighting. So you assume I'm in a room that's got 10 lights in it. Originally, when we came in to do the upgrade, they all had 100-watt light bulbs in those fixtures. We upgraded those to some sort of LED, and we installed our meter at the circuit level.
Those lights look a little bit bigger than 100 watts there, Aaron.
Well, they're
One
LED.
up to your top left, yeah.
Oh yeah, that 1500 watt over there. But so we do that upgrade, we install the meter, and then we come in and we can say, all right, today, Wednesday, April 23rd, whatever today is, the lights in that room were on for 10 hours. We know that originally there were 10 100-watt lights in that room. And so over 10 hours, we know you would have consumed 10 kilowatt hours. We actually observed that you consumed 1 kilowatt hour, which is consistent with them being 10-watt lights, which is what we installed. So we know that we saved you 9 kilowatt hours. Tomorrow, on Thursday, maybe the lights are only on for 5 hours. So you would have consumed 5 kilowatt hours. You actually consumed half a kilowatt hour. Your savings is 4.5, and we bill you on that. So we track the actual behavior of the customer. For some customers, it varies, and we're leaning more into actually something that we picked up from Redaptive a little while ago is, if you want to lean into expertise, our customers are the experts in their building behavior and their building operations. And so we say, all right, in order to make this as cost effective for you as possible, you tell us what your minimum operation is. So if you tell me that you're going to occupy this building 100 hours a year or 100 hours a week, I'm going to ask that you guarantee that you occupy it at least 70. And if you're occupying it less than 70, I'm just going to bill you as if you were at 70. And that lets me drive down the cost of capital. So as long as you're within the realm of what you assume is reasonable, you're going to come out ahead. If for some reason you shut down this facility for 3 months a year, you're going to pay a little bit more out of pocket, but you're the expert on whether or not that's going to happen.
Great. And Julia?
So we agree that there is sort of a fine line between M&V and the granularity. So we also take the vantage point that there is some customer assumed risk in terms of M&V. We iron that out with customers ahead of time. If they drastically change their occupancy or they drastically change the leases or ownership of their buildings, then that is a customer assumed risk that we have in our contract. But for lighting, we do take a baseline. We take burn hours into account. We measure the consumption of those circuits that the lighting systems are attached to, and we provide that in a transparent dashboard. That's pretty cut and dry. And then for other technologies, we work with the customer to identify whether we're going to use IPv option B or C, and we look through what granularity they're interested in terms of getting those circuits metered. So if they're interested in a representative sample across sites that look and kind of smell like each other, then we'll do that. If they want to pay for the Cadillac approach of metering every circuit across their portfolio, then we can do that and show the M&V process in our platform. But we like to talk through the necessity of that granularity at the asset level for every single building, and identify where customers feel that the importance of M&V lies, and then we work commercially with them to deploy it.
Okay, great.
So I think Julia touched on something really interesting, which may not be a question, but I think is worth talking about, which is what happens if a customer sells a building.
Right.
I mean,
yeah, I was just going to ask about that actually. So go for it. I assume you saw the same question, but the pro forma question was a really interesting one. This person was asking, how could efficiency as a service be incorporated into a value-add short-term commercial real estate investment? Any way it could get incorporated into the pro forma, but not burden the asset in a way that might complicate the subsequent sale?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. We actually work with a couple of REITs who have used our service specifically for that. Basically, going in, using a no capital cost efficiency as a service upgrade to, without spending money out of pocket, improve the NOI of a building. And, you know, with cap rates being what they are, that's gets you a pretty big return when you turn around and resell that building. And again, you know, in order to be as simple as possible for our customers, we've written our contracts so it's very easy to transfer to another customer, provided that they're a creditworthy customer, which often, you know, means that they have the capability to buy your facility from you for a market rate amount, that you aren't just, you know, handing it off to your brother-in-law at $0 so he can do something weird. So it's very easy to transfer, and then they just take over the service agreement. It's also a fairly simple termination. You know, if you just somebody else wants to take the building free and clear. And at the time of a building sale, the total service payment, early termination fee that you would make is a rounding error relative to like selling your building or your fleet of buildings. So it's never much of a hurdle. So yeah, we, again, sort of oriented towards simplicity. It's just really simple paperwork.
Cool. Yeah, that's a great example. And Julia, you mentioned part of your presentation, you work with a lot of portfolios that are constantly buying and selling assets, and it's very liquid. So yeah, same question for you. How do you sort of approach that? I'm particularly interested at the portfolio approach though, when you're working with, you know, a couple hundred property portfolio.
Yeah. So in our model, every site has its own contract with associated economics tied to it. So we do investment grade audits, especially for HVAC, at every site. And those feed up into what we call the NTP, which is our notice to proceed, and our LOA, which is the final contract assigned to that site. And if a customer decides to sell the building, then they have the opportunity to pay down the remaining saved purchase contract with no further interest expense. Redaptive is just looking to be made whole on the funding that we draw down from our debt facility to be able to pay for that site. So because we're able to pay off that debt in real time once a contract is paid off, we do not incur an additional interest rate to the customer at that time either.
Got it. Okay. Well, there's a lot of other good questions, but I do have to wrap it up here because we only have about 1 minute left and we need to wrap this up. So thank you guys for an awesome discussion. These folks, you'll see their email here shortly at the end, so feel free to reach out to them for more questions on this. So just to quickly wrap this up here, if we go back to the slides, I want to highlight a couple of additional resources that are available, links to the Navigator and to that efficiency as a service versus ESPC fact sheet that we talked about. Also want to show a short video about the Better Building Solutions Center, which has over 3,000 solutions to help you find proven and cost-effective strategies to reach energy, water, and waste reduction goals. So let's check out the video. There you go. Hard hat, solar panels, and wind turbines. What more do you need? So I want to go to the next slide here. Also want to highlight the Better Buildings Summer Webinar Series, which is starting in June. As you can see, several different webinars here about financing. One about financing in higher education, one about energy performance contracts in the fast lane. So another good way to learn about the definitely not efficiency as a service, but similar model that we talked about. And so partners are going to be discussing some of the most pressing issues that they're facing in energy and sustainability innovation. So you can register for this on the Better Building Solutions Center. Click on events and webinars to get you there. And if we go to the final slide, I just want to thank Julia and Aaron one more time. This is a really good conversation, and you guys are doing awesome work. So it's been a pleasure to know you over the years and to continue to watch what you all are doing. We are going to launch a short feedback survey in Slido, so that's really helpful for us to understand whether this was useful. I'd particularly be curious to hear if this kind of more of an interview format was a useful way to explore some of these issues. And your answers are going to be totally invisible to other attendees, so we'd love to hear that feedback. You can see the contact information for everybody here for to reach out to any of us. And if you want to learn any more about the resources we talked about today, check out the Better Building Solutions Center or just shoot me an email at my contact information there. So Aaron, Julia, thank you very much. And everybody enjoy the rest of the summit.
Thanks so much, Joe. Thanks, Aaron.
Thanks, everyone.